Welcome to the Queens of Moxie. I'm Mary Kay Campbell, the host of this program, and I'm so excited that you've decided to join us today. Every week, we bring amazing women to our podcast to talk about how they have stepped into joy and reclaimed their moxie and are living their authentic life. I want to get started, but before we do, I want to remind you to subscribe to the weekly email. Simply go to queensofmoxie.com and click on Weekly Inspiration. That way, every Monday morning, you'll get a link to the latest podcast, a beautiful image, and a fabulous quote. It's a great way to start out your week. So let's get started with today's podcast. Welcome back to the Queens of Moxie. I'm so excited, y'all. We have the most wonderful, delightful person I know, Kelli Palmer, joining us here today. And I think we've known each other more than a decade, and I have watched her career evolve, and it's just been a delight to watch. And I haven't told Kelli this, but when I listen to her, when I talk with her, I'm often reminded of Maya Angelou, because I knew you'd go like that, because you absolutely just have this calming, knowledgeable, just it is it's like getting a great big hug when I listen to you and when I talk with you. And so I'm just delighted and grateful that you took time out of your schedule to talk with us today, because you're just an amazing human being, and I'm so lucky to know you.
I am honored. Oh,
Yeah, see, now you can say, I remind someone of Maya Angelou.
oh. My favorite teacher of all time, but I won't interrupt you there. We can get back to that.
Oh, she was absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. So let me give people a little bit of background information about you so that they know a little bit more. Kelli is a lifelong learner, and I love that about her, because I love the idea of continuing to grow and learn and develop. And her background, y'all, is really different. It's different than what you would anticipate. So she went to Elon University in North Carolina and got her elementary education degree. I don't know how many people could handle this, but when she was doing, the fall semester, you kind of watch and observe, and then the spring semester, you student teach. Well, in the fall, her teacher that she was working with went on bed rest, and she became the permanent sub for the year. So y'all, I can't even imagine, supposed to be trained, and you want to talk about being thrown in the deep end. But she did that and then realized that was not the right place for her. She then went to Wake Forest University and got her master's in mental health counseling. And again, trial by fire, she was working the crisis line. And if you know anything about a crisis line, it's when people are in crisis and are suicidal, and you're talking to them, and work the graveyard shift for that. And so again, learned 20, that full-time, all day, every day kind of thing. That's hugely demanding, and recognized that wasn't where she could add the greatest value. Went to UVA and got her PhD in higher education. And her work has been in the DEI world. And I love what she says, because she talks about how all of the things that she did to get to this point have made her who she is and why she is so good at what she does. And it's that understanding of how to communicate with people, how to de-escalate a situation, how to really approach it from all these different angles, and have this appreciation for diversity, equity, inclusion, but just human beings. And she's also, just because those weren't enough, she got her she's gotten some certifications from Oxford, Harvard, Boston College, just little schools, no big deal. Oh, and she has 4 children. And one's 21, one's 9, one's 6, one's 4. And y'all, she's close to my age, and I'm like my kids are about to launch, and I keep thinking, oh my gosh, I am so not wanting to go back to that toddler stage. So my hats are off to you. And just so you guys also know, her additional professional work, she's worked with the University of Virginia for 10 years, lots of different roles, but also finished her tenure there in the president's office doing DEI work. Um, then did a semester at sea, little
Mhm.
time period, which I think would be just awesome. And then was 10 years at CFA, which is a financial certification education program. It's really hard to get a CFA certificate. And now she's at one of the coolest companies here in Charlottesville, and they're also in Ohio and Durham and uh, Canada somewhere. They're like all over
Vancouver.
Vancouver, thank you, which is called Willow Tree Apps. And so it's still doing the DEI work. So Kelli, tell us like what it's been like to be on this journey of, elementary education, mental health, higher education. Tell us about that process.
Well, in preparation for this conversation, you asked me to think about what advice I would give people. And
Mhm.
this is a question that comes up more and more the longer I live on this planet, which actually makes me question, have I crossed some sort of line in age? But we won't go there. But I did think about that. And the thing that came to mind, there are two things, but the one that I should share here is that it all makes sense in the rear view.
Mm,
In the moments when it's happening, I felt untethered saying to myself, I don't in fact belong in a classroom. I love to teach. What do I do with that? I didn't know in 1998 that this would be that this current 2023 version of me would be the outgrowth of having spent time in a classroom. I actually had a wonderful woman in my life who recommended that I look at this amazing and fully funded program at Wake Forest. And I did it because it was the next right thing.
mm,
And then turn around and 2 years later, I go, this was the right thing. I needed these skills to be a person in the world, but I do not need to use these skills as my primary revenue generating activity. So once again, somewhat untethered, but had fallen in love with the university landscape. And so again, I did the next right thing. So that's what it's been like. It's been one foot in front of the other, making choices I can live with, which
yeah.
is my other piece of advice to everyone. Um, and having real confidence over time because it bears out that the narrative makes sense in the rear view. And there's a story that I can tell that shows up in how I move in the world now that has the fingerprints of all those places and decisions and spaces.
Yeah, I mean, I, I love that the thought that in the rear view mirror it makes sense, but gosh, when you're in the moment sometimes,
Ooh,
I often think when I was younger, I used to like when something didn't go the way I wanted, I would used to blare out that Garth Brooks song, Thank God for Unanswered Prayers. I don't know if you know
yeah,
that song. I mean, I'm sure
yeah,
it's been a long time. And I think that's the thing that you really have to recognize that sometimes storms come to clear the path for you. Sometimes doors shut
yes,
because there is a window open that is much better. Um,
yes,
and I think a lot of what we have to do is really trust. We have to trust that
absolutely.
that there's good in the world and there's good intended for us. We have to trust ourselves that we have done the work.
Yes.
We're here because of the things that we've done that have laid the foundation for where we're going, and
Absolutely.
it's not easy going through it though. It's
It
not.
isn't. And, there were some real moments of reckoning. Let me not minimize them. I went into a role and knew within 3 months that I needed to leave the role and the business. Um, uh, those are uncomfortable steps to take, and especially with considerations around family and other responsibilities that we have. I mean, trusting is not always the easiest thing to do, but you know where I start with my trust? And this may not be a popular take. I start with me. I bet on me.
Good for
I
you.
bet on my ability to learn it, work at it. I've never thought I was the smartest person in any given room. But what I will do is I will work hard and I will work hard to work smart. People always talk about you need to work smarter, not harder. Well, sometimes you need time to know how to work smart in a space. And I have confidence in those kinds of things as time has progressed that, y- you know, my mother used to say, she still says, God helps those who help themselves.
Yeah,
In other words, I better be running fast to be able to get on the superhighway when the opportunity to merge comes my way.
that's right. That's right.
And that's
Well,
how I run.
it's like that parable of the man who was in the flood and went up to the roof, and a man in a canoe came by and he's like, "Oh no, God's got me." And then a man in a rowboat came by and same thing. And the lifeguard, what are they called? The military group, whatever.
Yes.
The rescuers came by, a helicopter came by, and he ended up drowning, and he got to the pearly gates, and he's like, God, what happened? And he's like, well, I sent a canoe, I sent a rowboat, I sent the
Uh-huh.
the coast guard, I sent the helicopter. It is that you've got to trust in your abilities,
Mhm.
trust in the foundation that you've laid, and and bet on yourself,
And
because
be willing to pivot. You
oh
know,
yes,
the person in your parable had a vision of what God getting them would look like. I don't
right.
know what that was, but it wasn't a canoe, a boat, or search and rescue. And sometimes I think we have a notion of what should be, and we've got to have some flexibility with that notion. To get from here to there, sometimes you have to walk to the side.
Yeah,
And sometimes you have to walk back, and that doesn't feel real good. And
yeah,
sometimes you have to walk out and around.
yeah,
And sometimes you go on those walks and realize while you're walking, there's a new there,
yeah.
right? Like that place I was trying to get to is not where I'm going now. It's not where I want to go. And
Mhm.
I look back at the major shifts in my career and in my life in general and think that that young woman, that woman thought she was heading towards X, and I surely am living in Y or Z.
Yeah,
And I'm so much happier, and I couldn't have imagined it when
yes,
I thought my destination was X. So we've gotta have a little grace with ourselves and
absolutely.
trust the universe might be speaking to us a little bit when things don't look the way we thought they should look. Like, consider the canoe.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Kelly, it's so interesting because probably for 10 years at least, I kept hearing this: Mary Kay, you should be an inspirational speaker. Mary Kay, you should be doing something different, like with women. Like, and I didn't know what it was.
Yeah,
I knew the inspirational speaking. Yeah. But as a single mom, I needed to provide for my family. So
right.
doing that didn't seem to jive very well with providing for two children. And my kids were 2 and 5 when I got
Yeah,
divorced. So I had a long time to provide for them, and while I've dated over the years, I've not gotten remarried. And so it's me, I'm
yeah,
responsible for them. And I kept advancing in my career. And unlike you, I didn't pivot. I just kept moving up, and
yeah.
where the opportunities were in more of the strategic marketing world, not the writing, not the connecting with individuals. And as I moved up, I did less and less connecting with individuals and telling their
Ah,
stories. And I mean, honestly, probably 10 years ago, I was at a women's retreat for church, and they were talking about, what is the thing that lights you up? What is the thing that makes you just, you're firing on all cylinders, you just feel really good when you're doing it. And you're going to sit there and you're going to say, I am not going to say that. And honest to gosh, Kelly, there were three things I thought of. And one of them, I was like, quite frankly, I was like, oh, hell no. I'm not saying that. I literally was like, no way. And
Oh,
and the woman sitting next to me was in her late 60s, and I had led Vacation Bible School for 3 years. And when you do that,
yeah.
you get up in front of the church and you're like animated, which I am anyway. And she patted my
Just a
knee
little bit.
just a little. I know. I often say I'm a lot and I am not for everybody. And I'm okay with that now. I wasn't before. I used to dim my light.
Oh, peace with self.
Yes.
Isn't it glorious?
Oh my gosh. It's huge.
I interrupted your story. Keep going.
It's okay. We're going to come back to that though, because it's such a big thing. So she pats my knee and says, "Okay, Miss Cheerleader, what's your thing?" And Kelly, the thing I was not going to say was cheerleading. I was
As it
like,
should be. The
"Oh
universe
my
spoke.
gosh." And at the time I was in my 30s, and I was like, what? But the three things were writing,
Yes.
were speaking,
Uh-huh.
and cheerleading. And
Of
what I
course.
what I wrap that cheerleading into is motivating others, getting
Yeah.
others behind a cause, getting people
Yeah.
excited. It's not getting out there and cheering. Although, I mean, I loved it. I did it in high school and college. Like it was a sport that I really enjoyed. But
Yes.
I was like, oh my God, I can't believe she just said that. And that was more than 10 years ago, you
Because your
know?
humanity effervesces it. Sometimes, really,
Yeah.
sometimes there are people in the world who move about it in a way that claims it
Yeah.
even before they know it. And I think you are one of those people. Who you are and how you move has always been in this space. You just now have the right platforms
Yep.
and the
Yep.
right season and all of those things to do exactly what you're doing in this moxie filled world that you've created.
Exactly. Exactly. And what I want for others is to find that space for them,
Mm,
whatever it is.
yes.
Whatever it is that brings you joy, wherever it is that you can be your authentic self. I am loud. I know that, right? So I went into a co-working space after it had opened, and I realized I was sitting there working. And anyway, I ended up on a Zoom call. My earbuds didn't work, and I was talking as softly as I could. And
Hmm.
afterwards, the CEO came up to me and said, "Hey, next time go in the phone booth." And I was like, "Oh my God," I felt like a child being reprimanded. And he wasn't. I
Oh,
just was like, and what I realized in that situation was that it is an amazing co-working space. It is not for me.
yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
for me. I'm loud. I can't, even when I try to be quiet and whisper, I'm loud, and it is what it is. But it's that whole idea that instead of I beat myself up for about a day and a half, and then I realized, you know what? Me being loud, me being excited, me getting people behind things is one of my gifts.
Mm,
It's one of the ways I bring value.
hmm.
And so if I try to dim that light, like I did for years, I'm not being authentic to myself. And I'm not giving the world the gift that God has given me, or whatever you believe, whether it's God or the universe or
Yeah.
whatever. This is who I am. This is the value some of the value I bring. And I'm here to do that for people. And so don't dim it, and I mean, have you found you're so self-assured and confident, and I love that about you.
Oh,
I do. Have you always felt comfortable in your own skin?
no way.
It's because
I
we're
mean,
it's because
let,
we're midlife, right?
right, right. Let's be really candid about it. I occupied spaces and places in my career where you needed to fill, or at least I thought I needed to fill a typology.
Yep.
The history of teaching is so interesting. Teachers weren't allowed to be married at first. They observed certain, ways of comportment. And those expectations, though evolved, are still similarly restrictive relative to society, who and what a teacher is and should be. And I chose that as my first profession, right? And then I moved into the higher education landscape where the identity of an institution is manifested in a typology of a person that works there, among many other ways. But there was a season of, you sourced your clothes from one of three stores and your shoes always looked like everyone else's. And so if you were sitting somewhere where people only saw feet, they'd know which university you belong to. I mean, it I
I did
I
not know
don't know.
that.
Well, I don't know that anyone articulated it in that way, but I'm an observer. And
Mhm.
so being able to move up meant choosing where I inserted self.
Mm.
And I didn't choose to insert self in all the ways that I now do.
Right.
I think there's a a walk, at least that I had to do. I don't, time is moving, and I don't know what it is like to be someone freshly finishing college right now.
Mhm.
But what I do know is that in my season, I I learned, grandma said, dress for the job you want, not the job you have.
Right.
And my mother said, you be indispensable so that they would not know what to do without you.
Yeah.
And so I knew I had to get into a place. I had to not make waves. I had
Yes.
to get trusted and valued, and then I could move.
Yeah.
Then there was a lane, and I could be more and more of me over time. And so with the first job, that was like a little wiggle.
Yeah.
And with the second job, that was like a little inspired dance. And now we're in a phase in whatever job this is where I define the lane
Love it.
and I dance however I want to. But that took time. And I don't like to put out any illusions. It's not however I want to have disregard for others, There's still definition there. I get nervous as a DEI practitioner when we talk about our authentic selves, particularly with junior and underrepresented employees. Um, you need to be your best work self in
Yeah.
your workplace. And I have found my success in finding and creating, as you have, a world around my workplace where I can be the rest of myself so that I don't have to give up anything in the total.
Mhm.
Ultimately, I get everything, but you don't get everything everywhere.
Yes. Yes.
And so I've gradually expanded getting to be who and what I want to be in the workplace as I've gotten more senior, but I've always compensated for it on boards, in community work, in friendships, in personal relationships. You, you, you know, not all people are going to be all things. Not all places are going to be all stages. And I'm living in that.
And you've got the awesome hair and the fantastic glasses. And when you go out and present, you always have some signature piece that
Yes.
that stands out, right? I know
Yes.
this about you,
Yes.
sweetie. I
Yes.
do. And
Yes.
I
Yes.
love it
Yes.
because, for and you're I didn't have it the extent that you did, but you know, you have to dress a certain way. You have to talk a certain way. You have to,
Right.
and quite frankly, the university that you worked in is a very conservative, traditional university. It's trying to move out of that space and to be
Yeah.
more accepting of things. But especially like when I got here 15 years ago, it was pretty, let's just say it, white male, upper class. Like that was the
And that's the history of the
it
institution,
absolutely is.
right? Like I remember celebrating 30 years of women,
Yes.
30 years of women.
Yes.
So yes. And you've noted the places where I've have artistic license now, right?
Yeah.
You knew me roughly 10, 15 years ago. I had long, straight, dark hair.
You did. You did.
Um, and I wore a lot of black. And every once in a while there was a flare scarf or brooch or something that was my freedom. And now freedom looks differently. I coordinate my sneakers to my glasses, and my hair is not found in nature, and yet is naturally curly and shaved on the sides and all the things. And I walk in lockstep with my business, and I've chosen to align myself with a place that I can do this,
Yeah.
but I also know the privilege that comes with that,
Yeah.
and not all of us can.
Right.
So when you can't, then how do you not dim your light?
Exactly, exactly. I worked in an accounting firm who had never had a marketing director in 90
Mhm.
years and never changed their logo, was navy blue, and
Oh.
yeah, you can imagine. Um, and one of the things I realized was that, I mean, I was grateful that I had the opportunity to rebrand them and to introduce some colors and a graphic element. But like people would literally come in my office and I wouldn't have the fluorescent lights on. I'd have, a desk lamp and a floor lamp, and I had a colorful rug and colorful pillows and pictures. And they were like, oh, I was like, if
Yes.
only you knew.
Yes.
And so, some of it is pushing the boundaries and
Yeah.
expanding people's perspectives, and some of it is, like you said, finding those places where you can do it, because you do have to provide for your family. You do have to be successful. I love the fact that you say you started, you know, and wiggled, and
Yeah.
then moved up and danced and
Mhm.
so you established yourself within the criteria, the norm, whatever you want to
Yes.
call it. And then as you grew and as you moved organizations and as culture changed, I mean,
Mhm.
Charlottesville is a very liberal community, in many ways. And so there are opportunities here that you may not have had in other places. And
Yeah.
so I think that helps support it. But
Yes.
it took bravery, and it took
Mm.
confidence in yourself. And that's what I feel, when I talk to you is that
Mhm.
that deep seated, I am good, I am worthy, I'm perfect, not perfect,
Mm.
but I'm great the way that I am. And that's how we should be looking at ourselves. I'm not saying we don't recognize our flaws, because we all
Yeah.
good gosh, we all have them. But I think as women, we so often are people pleasers. We so often try to do everything that we're supposed to do for everybody else, pour
Mhm.
into everyone else, and then we end up with an empty pitcher, or not being representative of who we're supposed to be. And so I think
Yeah.
that's valuable. It
You
really is.
talking about that empty pitcher makes me think about, this notion of put your own oxygen mask on first. You
Yes.
know, for all the grounding that you sense in me, I'm still working on that with
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
You know?
I do.
We all have a project, and I'm not beating myself up about it, but I'm reminding myself of
Mhm.
how much more there could be if I had the full flow of oxygen,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Well,
know?
I mean, honest to goodness, if you don't put your oxygen mask on first, you and your child will die. Literally.
That's right.
Literally.
That's right.
And so it's hard to go, what do I need to do to nourish myself, to be so that I can
Mhm.
be the best I can be for these people I love, for this situation, for this group I'm working with.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it's society, I don't know what it is, but for a long time I thought it was selfish for me to want to do those things. And in my old age, I've come to realize that's not selfish, that's actually nurturing and
Yes.
allowing you to be that person for somebody else. And that's huge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and it's easy to forget in the pursuit of, you
Mm,
know, and I leave that blank there for everybody who's listening
mhm.
to put in what they're pursuing. Maybe you're pursuing motherhood. Maybe you're pursuing partnership. Maybe you're pursuing career trajectory or success. Maybe you're pursuing some other form of self actualization. But whatever it is, in pursuit of,
Mhm.
we can't get there without the oxygen.
You can't. We
We
can't.
can't do it. And it feels a little preachy as I say it, but I'm talking to myself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah.
Oh, Kelly, I was such a, helicopter mom. I mean, I was. I fully acknowledge it. Now that my kids are older and able to articulate things, I'm like, "Oh, oh, I'm sorry." I had my reasons for doing that. Their dad is
Yeah.
verbally and emotionally abusive, and like I felt like I had to make up for what was happening in the other household, and
Mhm.
and so I poured everything into my kids, their whole lives. And what I've come to realize is they didn't know that when they were with their dad, I was doing things with my friends, and that I never talked about what I wanted and what I needed. And if they wanted
Mm.
another piece of meat, or they were still hungry and I hadn't finished all mine, I would give it to them, or whatever. I give them the best piece of whatever.
Yeah.
And I think parents do that
Yeah.
by nature, and we're supposed to, we're given these amazing little beings that we've got to somehow get to adulthood, right? And um but I think that I what I thought was the right thing to do for them, and maybe it was at the time, sacrificed too much of myself in that process. And before we started recording, I was talking about how I'm going to move to the beach, and
Yes.
and that I hate to say this because it sounds bad, but like for a while there, I was like, I'm kind of in purgatory. Like
Yep.
I'm here, I'm pouring into my kids. I don't regret it, but I'm also in a waiting, a holding pattern
Yeah.
until I can do what I want to do. Um, and so I want to be sensitive to time because I know you've got like a crazy,
Oh,
crazy schedule. So I want to leave with one last question. You've already
sure.
given your advice for people, but what, looking back on your life and looking at where you want to go, what are the things that you cherish most, that you would say to somebody and say, don't forget this, or
Mm,
remember XYZ? Like what is it that is like this resounding message that you hear or that you want to remember?
mm. For me, the thing that will matter in the end, and it has mattered all along, are the relationships. And they change over the season.
Mhm.
The seasons.
Yeah.
Caring about one's family, understanding them, their challenges, their opportunities, the realities, being in that and of that. Um, and I think when I say that, a family of origin, right? Um, Thinking with great care about with whom you partner. I too am a divorced human, and I am also a currently married human. I think about the choice around partnering as affecting every other piece of your adult life.
Mm.
The relationship with the humans you choose to grow, whether you start them from a seed or whether you take them and care for them from a time when they've already germinated. Those relationships reorient us when we become less connected with the newness of the world, but they're also such a great place to reinvest. And then there are all those people along the way, like the lady who was sitting next to you and patted your leg, and with the greatest of lightness and kindness named exactly who you are,
Yeah.
right? You talk about Maya Angelou. She wrote my recommendations for grad school. You know, there are people that pass you on the pathway of life that are there for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. We've heard that before. Receiving what there is to be given and giving it back either to them or to someone else by paying it forward. All of these things are what I'm talking about when I talk about relationship. It is the single greatest thing to me. I I don't necessarily know what's next. I don't necessarily have an urge for legacy. Um, what I want to do is leave it better than I found it with the humans.
Yeah.
And so that's where I would point. And I would also say, I'm not sure that's for everybody, but at least know and be able to name your North Star.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I do. I'm
Mm.
so grateful, like I said, that you've taken time to speak with us.
Oh.
And I know everybody listening today is just like, oh, I want Kelli to be my friend. I know that.
It it is such a pleasure and an honor to be with you. And you know, I don't always think about myself as someone that anybody should particularly be listening to. So um thank you for holding up the mirror for
Mhm.
this moment. May we all do this with those that we care for.
Thanks for joining us on the Queens of Moxie podcast. I hope that you found it inspirational and that it helps you to think about how you can step into joy and live your authentic life. And remember, we have a weekly email so that you don't miss any of these episodes. Plus, it starts your Monday out with an inspirational quote and a beautiful image. If you haven't subscribed yet, go to queensofmoxie.com and click on Weekly Inspiration. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.